as good. And one of my bold predictions for this year, and I don't know how bold it was that Jordan Poyer was going to be a Pro Bowler, and I think he could be on his way. He's been really good as well. On the offensive side of the ball, I mean, yeah, I got to go with John Feliciano. From his ability, the Tennessee game was so important. Like, that's one of those games that you'll look back on at the end of the season. If you lose that game, that's one of those typical Bills losses that keep them out of the playoffs. If you lose that game, because Tennessee was not as good of a roster as this Bills team. I think we've determined that after 5 weeks. And so to lose to that team and that quarterback would have been an absolute killer. And I thought that John Feliciano's seamless transition from right guard to center. And if you noticed, it was Spencer Long came into the game for Mitch Morse. He came in at center for a snap or two. And then quickly they switched those guys around because obviously Spencer Long had his struggles at center last year in New York. And I thought Spencer Long played really well, but it goes back to what you were talking about, the communication with John Feliciano, the way that he kind of, that nasty streak that he has that kind of rubbed off on everybody else on that line. He's been so good. And I think that he's keyed the continuity between the group, because I think he really has brought in, he said he's never been in a locker room where the offensive line wasn't close. And then I started telling him about this group last year and how, I never really saw Ryan Groy talk to Deion Dawkins, and they always are in there joking around together, coming up on each other's interviews, and like just Quinton Spain walking around with Justin Bieber blowing on his boombox. I mean, there's just a different vibe around this offensive line, this offense this year. And I think a big part of that is John Feliciano.
Leave it up to the Italian to set the table there, Paul.
Oh God!
Got him.
Yeah, this is where we are at 11:15 p.m. Eastern Standard. This is what we're doing.
Well, we know Matt used to cover UFC, so if you want to meet me in the octagon, I'll be there, ready to go.
Wow. I feel like you're in my weight class, Mario.
I'm twice your weight class, unfortunately.
So I want to ask Matt. So we had mentioned before Quinton Spain, and we had made a joke on an episode a long time ago where we compared everybody on the offensive line to different types of vehicles.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Quinton Spain was the 1975 Mercury Grand Marquis. The one with the plush interior. Grandparents probably had one.
Oh my God.
It was massive, right? So I really feel like Quinton Spain, there are times where I feel like he becomes a victim to Deion Dawkins. And that might be perspective a little bit, right? I think Quinton Spain ended up on the free agent market as long as he did, because I have a feeling like a lot of people gave Taylor Lewan a lot of credit for Quinton Spain's production, right? So Spain was on the free agent market for a lot longer than I think a lot of people expected. Bean didn't miss that. And so, well, this guy's still here. I'm not going to say we need him, but I think our football team is better with him. So let's go ahead and bring him in. What have you seen from Quinton Spain this season that makes you confident that he's a starter next season? Because I think memory serves me right. I think he's only on a 1-year deal. I don't remember if we signed it to 2-year. I might be wrong on that.
It's either a 1 year or a 1 year or 2 year with just a 1 year guaranteed.
Yeah,
but I think it's a good question, and I think that there's nothing I've seen through 5 weeks that would convince me to sit here and tell you that he's going to be here in 2020. I don't know because right now, if you ask me what is the long-term projection of this offensive line, and by long-term I mean 2-3 years, I think your guards are John Feliciano and Cody Ford right now. That's who I think is your best possible guards. I know you guys like Deion Dawkins there, but I just think that Cody Ford has so much potential inside, where on the outside I think he's a liability. So that's where I kind of go with that. But with Quinton Spain, I think there's just too many periods of time where I think that there's a letdown in both the run and the pass game. I think that Deion Dawkins probably isn't helping him like you mentioned, but he's got to be a little bit better. He's not on that rookie deal anymore. He was a free agent that was brought in here that I can't remember the exact numbers, but where he shows well, like when he has a good rep, when he has a good block, he's actually a lot quicker in his pulls than I would have ever anticipated for his size, which I like as well. And I think there's a lot to work with there. And I think, like I said, I know I probably sound like a shill for Bobby Johnson, but that guy really, I've been impressed with him because, it was so bad last year with Juan Castillo. I almost felt like it was, Juan Castillo was like a cardboard cutout. I didn't even ever hear him really say anything to anybody. So I think that Bobby Johnson is coming here, and every time you walk on the practice field, he is locked in, and he is in guys' face, and he's working with guys, repping with guys. And I think that goes a long way for some of those guys that might be teetering on the will they, won't they be good line, and you'll get a couple more to push on the other side. And I think that's a big reason he brings that mentality from Indianapolis. I think that's a big reason why that line was so good last year. I know they have Quentin Nelson, and he's a mauler and a great player, but the rest of that line, they did a really good job bringing a lot of those guys along.
And that's a pretty healthy task, right? To basically rebuild your line across free agency. Let's just call a spade a spade. That never works. Right? When can you think of an NFL franchise that basically rebuilt their entire offensive line in one offseason via free agency and the draft and have it actually work? It never works. Your coaching staff has to be so dialed in, especially with a first-time line coach. Like you might be able to do that in a more established system, but you're talking about first-year line coach bringing in a whole bunch of new people. It just simply never works. And Quinton Spain is on a 1-year, $2 million deal. So,
1 year, $2 million.
Yeah, that's peanuts. Right. That's a peanuts deal. There's no long-term commitment there.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that Bills fans, while, I love this job because I think that there's no community in the NFL more engaging and more fun, but sometimes a little bit overreactive than Bills Mafia. And one piece of that is how many new parts are on this offense as a whole. And I think that the expectations for this thing to hit the ground running day one of this season, I think if you take even 25% of the turnovers that Josh Allen has had that are on him, don't get me wrong, they're definitely on him. But if you take those away, we're talking about a top 10 offense on the heels of an absolutely inept offense from 2018. And I think you have to be happy with that. Just to continue to hear Brian Daboll's name mentioned amongst media members as a potential head coaching job kind of tells you the respect around the league for him, the New England connection, what he was able to do at Alabama. They really like him. They really play for him. I think that the relationship he's cultivated with Josh Allen has been super important. And that's, you're not seeing that in some other places. So I think the Baker Mayfield, Freddie Kitchens marriage could lead to divorce anytime. I'm doing some marriage counseling here. They might send me to Cleveland. So, I think that going back to where we started earlier on, 4-1 after 5 games, really unbelievable defense. And I think an offense with room to grow. I think you got to be happy with where you are.
Yeah. I have to take an exhale, and so does Paul, because Paul made a promise to our subscribers, #Nation as they are called, that he would not talk ill or poor about Daboll because we have some vastly different opinions about Mr. Brian Daboll, and it's so interesting because Paul will get on play calling, as will I sometimes. With you have a quarterback that comes back from a concussion, and then you're running 2 sneaks right into the teeth of that defense. Certain things like that. It's kind of like a little bit of a microcosm of the things that we think are a little bit upsetting of how Daboll. But I understand that
who had a problem with that. Who had a problem with that? Just so I know.
Paul and I actually.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's football.
It is.
And that's coming from an MMA guy, so I'm a little bit more accustomed to the physicality of the 2 sports that I've covered. But if you're cleared to play, you're cleared to play.
I think
just a note.
Am I getting soft, Paul?
No. I think here's the thing. If it were Kyle Orton, nobody would care, right? I think there's a very thick line you draw in the sand because you do have to handle Josh Allen with kid gloves at times, right? And that's just one of those circumstances where he's coming off of concussion protocol and you're gonna run 2 QB sneaks in the first quarter. That, I think that's the kind of line in the sand that rubs a lot of fans the wrong way, where, okay, you're saying that he's the franchise, but this is the look that you're gonna give. I get the perspective, right?
Yeah.
Again, if it were Kyle Orton, Nathan Peterman, I don't think anybody would care. But it's Josh Allen, and he's treated differently. That's just a fact.
Yeah, he was brought in. I mean, you invested a lot of things in him, and I understand that if he's good, you go. Having been a quarterback who's never played in the NFL, who's suffered concussions, I know that running the ball is the last thing I want to do when I come back from a concussion and I have to play a game. I understand that. That's my own personal perspective. And the other thing is this. You want to talk about the scenario that's going on. You have Dorsey there. That's what you said. You said it yourself. He is working with Allen. You got Daboll, who's trying to be the overseer of the offense and everything that he's trying to do as well. Do you think that Daboll was 100% in on that, being that Dorsey was one that interviewed for the offensive coordinator position, or do you? I mean, with Dennison, or do you think that it's a situation where they're trying to prepare themselves for when Daboll does eventually leave, because he does have some head coaching talk around the league?
That could probably be the case. From what I've been able to see, it seems like Ken and Brian have a really good relationship. Now, I'm not in the room, so I don't know what the kind of intricacies of that are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does make sense if they liked him for the offensive coordinator job in any way to kind of line him up, because they weren't any good last year. And I remember when Brian's name was getting thrown around for that Green Bay job. So, I think that there's a lot of respect for him in the game. I think that the play calling, it's interesting because I think that it's kind of a double-edged sword. So I noticed that there was a lot of calling for, some heads last year when they were running the ball the way that they were consistently trying to rely on the run, especially on first and second down. Whereas I feel like the transition to this year has been a more pass aggressive style of offense. And I still think there's a chunk of the fan base that isn't still happy with it. I think there's just some people that maybe just don't like Brian Daboll. I don't know.
Oh, it could be. I mean, you could tee off here tonight, Matt, if you want. I mean, I like the spicy Matt actually coming at us saying, guys, it's football. Stop being so soft. But to back up your point, though, Matt, I mean, you're talking about last year versus this year through 5 starts. I mean, Allen was 69 for 124 for a 55% completion percentage. 5 starts this year, he's 102 for 163 for 63%. I mean, we were salivating over the offseason saying, listen, if this guy can get anywhere over 60% completion percentage, this team's going to be in the middle of the pack and they're going to put up some points offensively. They're moving the ball. It's just, drives aren't ending in the end zone as much as, and I'm like Bill's Mafia. I'm like at everyone else. I'm like, listen, you give us an okay offense, we think it could be great. You give us an awful offense, we want it to be okay. We always want that little bit more from our team and expect a little bit more from our team. And it's interesting too, when I took a look at Allen's rushing statistics, he's actually run the ball more this year than he did last year in the first 5 starts. So it was interesting to see that dynamic where I know, of the 89 attempts that Allen had last year, only 22 were actually called by Daboll, which I understand. You had a sieve up in front of him. I mean, it wasn't good at all. So I think one of the things that they wanted to do is they wanted to try to protect their investment. And what I feel more, I'm just saying though, from a personal standpoint, I would feel more comfortable on a 4th and 2, turning it around and giving it back to that animal back there, the 36-year-old monster, and having him run into the teeth of the defense rather than my quarterback. I understand that completely. But then I also say, like, I agree with you. Like, this is football. Let these guys play a little bit. You know what I mean? But just, little things like that kind of get me with some of his calls. And some of the first couple games, I think he tried to be too cute with some things and try to put stuff on film so other teams would have to scout for that. Whereas I don't think he planned on running that later in the games that were like the really tough opponents that he was going to see. So,
Well, I mean, I think there's some really valid critiques of him as a play caller. I, for one, think that you saw against New England TJ Yeldon really establish himself as a threat in the short passing game. And I didn't think they used that nearly enough against Tennessee. I thought that every
Yeah.
time he was out there on third down, he was open in some capacity in that short. And maybe that's on Josh Allen. Who knows? Like, I'm not really inside there to know like how they're devising the game plan. I thought a couple plays that they've used that have worked. I really like the Isaiah McKenzie play that really set things up. And I thought that the calls for Duke Williams were good, were strong. I mean, everybody makes a lot about Duke Williams' touchdown, which was great, and he needed it. But he made a big play on third down to set up the first touchdown. And so I think that, he's been good, in a lot of ways. But I think no matter what happens, he's still only in his second year, and he has a whole new slew of players that he's trying to figure out what they're best at and how to position them to be successful. You got to get Robert Foster involved when he's 100% healthy, because I mean, that's one thing that I've been shocked at. And I think that maybe that was the real push to them to get rid of Zay Jones is, hey, we're looking at things here and we have not even utilized Robert Foster. And he was our big play guy last year.
Yeah, and Believers Talk, which is Joe who does the play-by-play for us over on Sportscaster on Sundays, and then he does play-by-play here on YouTube on his channel. Actually, Joe's at 940 subscribers, so real close to monetization. If you're not subscribed to Joe, make sure you head over and do that over at Believers Talk. He says the Bills are 6-0 when Allen throws for over 60%. And as Bills fans, I think there was a lot of, well, if we can get Allen completing more passes, then that's the key to this offense, but that comes at a cost, right? Mm-hmm. So one thing I think has frustrated a lot of fans is the lack of completions downfield. Now, that hasn't been for a lack of effort. Allen is actually ranked 11th in the league in deep pass attempts this season. However, really not many of them have been completed, right? And do you think Robert Foster changes that dynamic on offense? Do you think he's that integral that bringing Robert Foster, a healthy Robert Foster back, is going to be able to change the way that the season's going 20 yards down the field?
I think it can, but I think what we're seeing is the development of a concerning trend in that with Josh, I think that there's a little bit of a Frankenstein type situation, like where they're trying to kind of build him into what they feel like he should be, right? Like, so he was born as a prospect, and they wanted him that he was this gunslinger, this aggressive, like big armed, athletic player. And they were like, well, let's dial this back a little bit because we need to be effective in the short to intermediate game. So we're going to bring in all these pieces that we think can do that. And we're going to completely change your mentality as a player. And so now I just think that we could get to a point where he's out there just thinking way too much. He's not really seeing the field as much because he's so concerned about what's happening like in that short game that I don't know. I think that that's part of the reason why a lot of that's not working downfield, because he's not out there really looking to make the big plays anymore because he's almost been scared into the safe stuff. And so I think that there's a way to combine those worlds together.
Paul, for what he did to me in our fantasy league this past week, because he told me I totally jumped on the bandwagon with Yeldon, like you said, Matt. He was in the Patriots game, he was really great at that short intermediate. He was open a lot, and the Bills didn't utilize that against Tennessee, and I thought they were, so I put him in my lineup. So there it happens. You know what I mean? So that being said, I think Allen is too. I believe it too. What you're saying is that I think he really is. He's trying to break it down. We forget sometimes that this kid, how young he is, and the things that he has to try to develop as a quarterback in the NFL, and the things that he needs to learn in order to grow to be one of the, dare I say, elite guys in the game if he wants it. I mean, the guy's got all the physical tools you could want in a quarterback. You flip over to the defensive side of the ball, Tremaine Edmonds is probably one of the most physically gifted linebackers in the NFL. That's the kind of guys that the Buffalo Bills go after for first-round talent that they want to be the quarterbacks of their respective sides of the ball. And in Josh Allen's case, I think there is some credence to the fact that you haven't had Foster in there, who does take the top off the defense. You have John Brown, who is catching. I was shocked to see that he's catching more first down plays than Beasley. You think Beasley would be that guy, but it's more John Brown catching those passes. And then, I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface with Dawson Knox, how much of an animal that guy is. So, I mean, all these things, these moving parts that are coming. I'm sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, let me just add one thing because you're onto something there. And I think one of the things, I don't want to lose this train of thought, to run this style of offense, like the New England style of offense, where you take advantage of that short stuff and you drive down the field with 10, 12, 13 play drives, you can't have any mistakes. They're having too many mistakes right now. You look last game, that Dawson Knox drop, I think that was on third down, a complete drive killer. When Cody Ford blows his assignment and Josh Allen gets blown up, you are cannibalizing your complete kind of style of play with these kind of mistakes. And so you have to ask yourself, are you good enough as an offense? Do you trust in everybody out there enough to sustain these drives? Because that's the only way you're going to up that point total. Now, it might not matter in a lot of games because they have a pretty easy schedule down the stretch and this defense is legit. But if you're going to run the style of offense and ask Josh Allen to be the type of quarterback you're asking him to be, you can't have any mistakes. And even with Allen's mistakes, and there's been plenty, there's still way too many around him that aren't giving this team the ability to cash in a lot of these drives. Because when they get there, they've been one of the best red zone teams in the league. And I will maintain, I think that there's maybe only one other quarterback in this league, and I think it would be probably Deshaun Watson. Patrick Mahomes, because he's Patrick Mahomes, but that I think is a more unbelievable weapon in the red zone than Josh Allen. He's so dynamic once you get inside the 20.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that, Matt, because as far as red zone attempts, the Bills have only had 12 this whole season, which is 26th in the NFL. So it's a plodding offense, but their efficiency inside the red zone has been great, right? That's been great for them. The problem is they're just not there often enough. Mm-hmm. And without Devin Singletary, you really saw the explosiveness leave this offense. He is just such a great game breaker for you. And I know that a lot of fans are clamoring for more tight end. They want to see more Dawson Knox. Mm-hmm. And I understand that. But Brian Daboll historically has never used tight ends in his offense. Like, a leopard's not going to change his spots. Like, you're just going to have to wait there.
Ironic, since he coached them in New England.
You would think, right? The former tight ends coach in New England, you would think.
But then
right?
again, Paul, let's think about it. Being a tight ends coach in New England, it's like being a quarterback's coach for Montana. All you gotta do is cross your arms and sit back. Really, what do you got to do?
It's being Adam Gase when he is in Denver.
Oh, stop it! That is pretty funny, though.
Yeah. But I think Singletary and Knox are a big loss right now. Knox from an efficiency standpoint, because he's been very effective when he's been able to get his hands on the ball. Singletary from an availability standpoint. Those are two very explosive pieces of the offense that I think without as much integration, the offense kind of plodded along.
Yeah, but what a beautiful treat to have for the Buffalo Bills. And this is probably one of the big reasons why they're 4-1 is the fact that, Matt brought up a great point, is the fact that you can't have mistakes. Brady's been running that type of offense for 19 years. He doesn't have any mistakes. He knows the answers to the test. He knows where the ball goes. He knows everything like that. The Buffalo Bills are having mistakes, but they're not having 3-and-out mistakes. And what we talked about last year a lot was that they were gassing this defense out. This defense is amazing, but you can't have them on the field for 35, 40 minutes. So what the offense is doing efficiently right now is that they're not having 3-and-outs. They're moving the ball, which allows the more valuable unit in this defense to get back and hunt and game plan and do a lot of things that they need to do, which results in them only allowing 11 points a game defensively. Now, they haven't played juggernaut offenses. I understand that. However, this is still the NFL. These are still professional athletes, and they are by far the more superior unit at this time. But the offense, being able to move the ball the way they are, is still pretty damn impressive with all the moving parts that we talk about.
100%.
So,
well said, both of you.
Let me ask a question, because again, I would love to get your perspective on this. And Bills fan 7883 mentions it as well, talking about McDermott likes to make rookies earn snaps, right? So we see Devin Singletary being very reserved with total touches, right? Not from a snap count perspective necessarily, but as far as total touches, he's been very reserved using them. Do you think that's on purpose, because they're looking at, they're a little concerned about the touches that he had in college and rookie burnout. Like in the NFL, I think going from your senior season or your final season in college, and then immediately going into your NFL career is tiring at the running back position. We've seen Fournette flame out. We saw Kareem Hunt flame out. But the guys that you haven't seen, McCaffrey, Kamara, those guys were rested earlier in the season with very limited touches. Do you think McDermott's more of the school of thought that that's something that he wants to do, is limit Singletary's touches early? Or do you think that this is just the way game flow has been?
I think it's probably like a safe answer, but I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think there's a piece of it that they don't want to run him into the ground too early, and it is a long season, and I think there's an adjustment period for rookies, especially running backs. That 16-game schedule, and if they have January aspirations, they're going to need Devin Singletary to be ready to go. And I think that also there's a piece of it that they have just seen something in Frank Gore from the very beginning that I think that not many people outside of that building really were seeing. And I think that I think definitely Devin Singletary played a role, like a large role in the decision to cut LaShawn McCoy. But I think Frank Gore was equally as important in that, because I don't think they were ready to hand the keys over to Devin Singletary. It's why I think they started Frank Gore. And I think that it's why even when healthy, he got a pretty good chunk of the work in that, I think it was the Giants game when he got hurt. So I think that what was happening is we were seeing that every time he touched the ball, Devin Singletary, he was doing too much with it to kind of curtail his usage too much longer. But I think when he gets back, I think it's going to be a pretty even distribution with eventually as we go on through the season with Devin getting the bulk of the work. But I'm kind of glad with the way that they've been very careful with this injury. And I'd be still very interested to see if he comes back against the Dolphins, because you got to be really careful with these soft tissue injuries, because if it's that serious, even if it's slightly serious, if you kind of go out there before you're ready and you aggravate it even further, it could be even more of a disaster. So it'll be interesting to watch. You never like to see this on a running back.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely not. And they use that additional roster spot for Sonoris Perry. So
OJ.
OJ.
God.
Is that official? Did he take the number, or haven't they announced that yet?
We haven't gotten a lineup card yet because we're not in the building this week, but I would imagine he would, for all the hoopla that he put everybody through for that back in the summer, I would imagine that if he doesn't go with 32, that would be a pretty big fail on his part.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Yeah, Paul couldn't help himself with the puns over the summer when Sonoris Perry wore 32.
I couldn't say many of them on air. That's for sure.
Yeah, I added a few of them out. I remember that.
Did you guys see that OJ murdered his fantasy matchup this past weekend?
Oh, he did it. He did it.
He did. He really he had a great week.
Yeah. Did you have to? No, he did. That's awesome. Yeah. So I mean, if we're talking about, because I know we touched on it briefly, some things that you want to change, some things you want to see. Like I said, Paul and I had an episode earlier. Actually, it was earlier today that we put out in the morning about the things that we want to see during the bye week. What is one thing that you could see this team doing for the rest of the 11 games, minus any kind of injuries that the Buffalo Bills have? What's one thing you would like to see this team do besides make the playoffs, because that's the obvious answer, but what's one thing that you'd like to see as far as their progressions go? It could be offensive line, it could be defensive line, it could be secondary. You okay, I want to see more turnovers in the secondary. I want to see this offensive line not give up a sack in a game or something like that. Going down the line, I mean, a lot of people seem to think we got the Dolphins, we got the Eagles, you got the Redskins, and a lot of people are earmarking those as 3 wins. I don't know about the Eagles, but I mean, I think the other 2 would be very winnable games, that putting you at 6-2 essentially. So going down the line, what's one thing that you like to see this team do going forward?
I could go a couple different routes. Mitch Morse, Robert Foster. We talked about both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Oliver, I talked about him. I'm gonna go with Cole Beasley. I think that he has been really effective in short periods of time, and he's gotten the targets in some of the games, but I just kind of envisioned a different impact level for him in year 1. And I think that they gave him the contract that they gave him to come in here and be Julian Edelman for this offense. And through this early stretch of the season, and part of it's on Josh, part of it's probably on Brian Daboll, part of it's on Cole himself. It just hasn't really materialized yet. And I think that that's kind of, for lack of a better term, the cheat code that could really set this offense in the right direction. And so I think that if you're asking what I want to see more of, I want to see almost more of an overcommitment to Cole Beasley in that short to intermediate game to get Josh Allen in a rhythm early. I think sometimes we're waiting, a drive or two before he even gets a target. So I think that that's one guy that I really think I want to see get going a little more.
Paul, how about you?
I want to play off Matt's point a little bit and ask a question. So game one, we saw 18 consecutive pass plays game one. Do you think, I know you talked about getting Josh Allen into a rhythm. Do you think that was one of the reasons why we saw 18 consecutive pass plays was exactly that, trying to get Josh and, trying to get Josh going early?
100%. And I think that I talked a lot about that going into the season. I thought one of my takeaways from year one was that how much of Josh Allen seemed to be better when he was able to put in a position to be, get himself into a rhythm. And I think that, when he gets going, I almost feel like because he's so raw, the way that he sees the field, if one play leads into the next play, I almost feel like his focus dials in even further. And so I think that if you can, get him out there, get him going early on. The problem with that is if you go out there and run 2 or 3 straight pass plays and they don't go well, we've seen that go in the opposite direction at times too, where he's kind of gets himself into a funk right off the jump. So yeah, I think that's the goal. And I think that they've done that a few times. And I think they've been really effective. Like we talked about, driving with just some mistakes that have stunted some of those drives.
Matt, you brought up a great point earlier. We talk about when Allen came in. I mean, and we've talked about it a little bit here on the show, is the fact that he came from Wyoming where he was the stud. He was the guy. He had to play hero ball. He had to do everything himself. I think once he realizes that it's not just only him, that he does have a defense over here. I mean, I know I've heard him give the sound bites on the post games about how awesome the defense played, and he's not wrong. But I'm saying that I think in the moment, his natural instinct is to, I got to win this. I got to do this myself. And that's where you probably see those lulls in the first couple of series when he has an incomplete or two. I think that's what kind of gets him down in that respect, because he thinks that, oh man, if we go 3 and out, or we go 4 and out, if we don't score on this drive, I've let the entire team down and I have to try to bring them back. So in that respect, I definitely see that in him a little bit more than him just trying to always look down the field like he did last year and try to hit the home run ball. So yeah, as far as what I would like to see moving forward with this team, I just like to see him, come away with some kind of continuity on that offense. I know they've mixed up the lines a few times and they had some injuries and whatnot, but I would love to see them just try to find what is your best 5 going forward for this team, and how, because it doesn't matter how good Josh Allen reads the field. It doesn't matter if Cole Beasley gets open and you try to get him involved early. It doesn't matter if John Brown, Duke Williams, all this other stuff, Gore, Singletary. It doesn't matter about any of that if those 5 horses up there are not working together. And you made a great point that OG Bobby Johnson is getting them in the right directions. He's very vocal. He's very in their face and everything. And these guys are much more intense than they were last year. However, I just want to see that 5 that they're going to move forward with, that you could say, all right, this is the 5 linemen that we have right now that we could win a playoff game, that we can go to the playoffs, that we can probably make a run if we had to, if it gets to that point because of our defense. Who's the 5 linemen that you're going to start going on after this bye week? So, I mean, that's the biggest thing for me moving forward with this team.
Well, I think that unfortunately you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with the Ty and Seki situation.
Yeah.
In that I don't think that he's shown any type of ability to stay healthy. So to pencil him in at one of those tackle spots just isn't going to work, because even if he's out there for a game, how long is he going to be there? Every time I've seen him in the locker room after a game, he's looked like he's been in agonizing pain. And so I just get the sense that this is not going to – I think he's a backup, especially at his age now. And so that limits you. It puts you at Deion Dawkins and Cody Ford at the tackles. I thought Ryan Bates played well. but he's a depth piece. He's a guy that can come in off the bench as an undrafted rookie. I think that gives you Mitch Morse, Feliciano at right guard, and Spain at left guard. If Spain ever really falls off, then you might be able to try to switch things up a little bit, maybe move Cody Ford inside, but you just don't have any depth at that tackle position now with all the injuries you've kind of suffered there. So I think that's probably the five that lined up against Tennessee is probably your five.
What do you think of that, Paul? Is that good for you? Is those five good for you? As you type, I love getting you when you type because I can tell the look on your face when you start typing. That's how it works.
No, I mean, I think Matt is. I think Matt's onto something there, right? When you brought in Tynasecki, you said if this guy can stay healthy, he can have a chance to impact our football team in a positive way, right? So you kind of knew when you were bringing him in that this was going to be the package that this present was wrapped in, right? You kind of were already under the understanding that there were health concerns that came along here, and you back that up by drafting Cody Ford. I do have to believe that they're a little disappointed with Cody Ford's play speed right now, right? And they carried 10 offensive linemen. Like, I don't know if there's a bigger sign of we're not entirely sure how this is all going to wash out by carrying 10 offensive linemen at the start of the season. And Matt, do you agree with me there? I don't think you look at your line and say, "Oh, we're solid," and you carry 2 full offensive lines.
No, I think the fact that Ike Bucker made this 53-man roster shows you that there is some serious depth concerns and the ability to stay healthy. Even Feliciano has been dinged a few times. The Iron Man of this offensive line has probably been Deion Dawkins. I feel like he's never hurt. Knock on wood.
Great. He's gonna slip on mac and cheese at his house tonight. And fall over.
Hey man. Get your money, man. I come from that MMA world where those guys were always looking for little marketing tools. So respect to Deion Dawkins for that for sure. But no, I think you're right. I think it's Cody Ford. I mean, when they drafted him, Brandon Beane came out and said, we see him as a right tackle, and right now he's not a very effective right tackle. So they're going to have to ask themselves some serious questions as the season goes along. And if it means going out and trying to figure out another option at that tackle spot, or if it even becomes that Ryan Bates is a 1-year fill-in type of option and you can move Cody Ford inside, the problem is if you move Cody Ford inside, is he playing at a higher level than Feliciano or even Spain is playing at right now? Mm-hmm. That's a question that you'll have to ask yourself. And I'm not nearly the tape devourer or connoisseur to be able to tell you which way that goes, but I struggle to think that in pass protection right now, Cody Ford is going to get the job done consistently.
Well, and I think that's probably the biggest issue that you have, right, is the Bills are throwing the ball a lot this season compared to last season, right? So when they were building this line, you looked at the pieces that they were bringing in, you're like, okay, these guys all, if you believe in PFF, these guys all grade really well in pass protection, right? Some people don't believe in it, and that's fine.
But some company, people, you hate possible.
I
It, Paul.
don't. I'm just saying that it was an argument to be made, right? If you find that to be useful. But the fact still remains that the Bills are throwing the football a lot this season. And if you're going to have a liability, right, you would hope that it wouldn't be in a second round pick, right? I understand there's a learning curve that comes along with that. But, if whatever move moves John Feliciano off this football team or off this field, off the starting line, I don't want to have anything to do with it, because he was brought in here to kind of relate OG Bobby Johnson's communication to everybody, right? Because he came over from the Colts, like he was familiar with OG. So that's just an issue to me, is I don't want to have anything to do with anything that removes John Feliciano from playing and starting on this line. If it moves Quinton Spain off, he's on a 1-year deal. I don't care. That's fine. If it moves Quinton Spain off, I'll deal with it. But I don't want to do anything that's going to compromise Feliciano, as he's just playing at too high a level.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen of Hashtag Nation, we want to thank you for joining us tonight on the very technical difficulty issue that we had of our split screen with Matt Parrino tonight of NY Up and Syracuse.com. He's the Buffalo Bills beat writer, and he was generous enough to donate his time to us tonight, and we're almost at the 12th. Yeah, twice. We're almost at the 12th hour, where Paul's going to turn into a pumpkin. So we have to get out of here, and all three of us need a much needed sleep. So Matt, can't thank you enough for coming on with us and talking Buffalo Bills football. Your insights, right on the money, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
I had a great time, guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, take it easy.
Have a good night, #Nation.